Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the Greeks in Age of Mythology Retold. I already covered their major gods, but just a quick recap over here. Zeus is focused on favor, cheaper myth units in terms of population, and infantry. Hades is focused on ranged units and fortifications, and Poseidon is focused on cavalry, and also naval warfare as you might expect. But let's talk about the Greeks in general, their strengths and their weaknesses, because there are both things at the moment. So one of their significant strengths is with regards to their heroes. In particular, in the early game, and a lot of games online right now are decided more or less in the early game. If you fail in the early game, everything else is just going to be fluff. And this is something that is absolutely happening right now with regards to how a lot of online games are being played at the moment. But regardless of that, the heroes for the Greeks are fairly strong. And the significant benefit over here is you can build these heroes. They're not really that expensive, 150 resources for Jason, for instance, 250 for Heracles, and, well, 2 favor, which is not really a big deal whatsoever. Those are fairly substantial benefits in terms of their combat prowess and their cost as well. They're certainly very, very cost effective. Not only are they great against any kind of myth units that you will encounter, so if you're getting raided by Odin with Valkyries as an example, then yeah, they can deal with that, or any kind of myth units. But on top of that, they can trade very, very well against a lot of human soldiers. So a significant benefit. Their lack of numbers, like you only have 4 heroes in total, can be a downside, especially if you're looking for a lot of map control. Only Atlanta and Bellerophon are really fast, so, Chiron to some extent, but he's a ranged hero, so there's limitations with that. But in terms of melee heroes, where a lot of the power is, you only really have Bellerophon and Atlanta, so that can be a bit of a downside. But still, overall, Greek heroes do get the job done. Now, in terms of their gatherers, their villagers, just generic villagers. They are the generic villagers in the game. Now, the upside with regards to Greek gathering capabilities is that with regards to favor, you can get a burst of favor faster than anyone else, any other civilization in the game. You can outpace them with regards to favor. That is a substantial benefit. The downside, well, you do need to build a lot of storehouses. You do need to build a lot of granaries. So do the Egyptians, for the record. And the Egyptians kind of have it worse because, they need to have a lumber structure. They need to have gold structure. But keep in mind, the Egyptians don't need as much wood as you do. You do need wood. You do need favor. You do need gold. You do need food. There's upsides and downsides with that. I would say that for the most part in the early game, there's upsides, but if you were to play a game that lasted a good amount of time, you would certainly start feeling the downsides over here because you would have to make those trade-offs. In fact, you have to make those trade-offs from the very beginning of the game. So, pros and cons with respect to that, especially with regards to favor gathering. Like, you do have to dedicate workers for it, but you can generate favor faster than other people, but you don't have the constant stream of favor that, say, the Egyptians or even the Atlanteans do have. So that is an aspect. And with the Norse, well, the Norse have their gatherers focusing full-time on gathering, unless you're building houses and farms or ox carts, because their buildings are constructed by infantry. So that is with regards to their gatherers. Economy, pretty solid, but not exceptional, not Egyptian level. However, their true strength, as far as I'm concerned, is with regards to myth units. Beyond the heroes you do have, you also have a really good selection of myth units. And because you can gain favor faster than other people, you can spam myth units. Effective myth units. And that is a pretty important benefit, because you have the best anti-myth unit capability, and you have the ability of getting more myth units than anyone anyone else. There's a reason Poseidon is dominating the multiplayer overall at the moment, and that does come down to centaurs, for instance. But it's not just centaurs, it's things like Minotaur rushing, as an example. It's getting things at a higher level, like Nemean lions, that can disable a significant portion of the enemy army in a single roar and just make them vulnerable to being destroyed or taking a significant amount of damage. Its scouting ability with Pegasus. Yes, Odin has those ravens, but that is one specific god. Others may not have that kind of scouting ability that you do inherently have as the Greeks for any of the major gods, and regardless of which minor god choice you pick. I mean, Hermes gets a free scout, but still, regardless of which of the Greeks you're playing as, you do have that map vision. You do have to dedicate units for it, but you do have a flying scout unit, and that is a significant amount of information that is going to help you out through a match. There's no real downsides, I would dare say, with the myth units. I mean, some of them may not necessarily be so great, like, Manticores potentially. Depends on the situation, right? Manticores can be great against swarms of human soldiers, if you're dealing with, like, swarms of infantry, as an example. Colossi, I would say they're a disappointment. Medusa are situational, that kind of stuff, right? Chimeras, really good myth units. Nemean lions, really good units. Hydras, really powerful, but also slow. So you got to keep in mind the mobility aspect. A lot of games are being decided right now on mobility. When it comes to their army, however, I would say that the biggest downside with regards to military units is with their human soldiers. They're not necessarily that great, and they are costly. I'll give you an example, just a perfect example. Hypeus. Consider Hypeus versus Raiding Cav. One-on-one, Hypeus win against Raiding Cav. But Raiding Cav is cheaper to get. And you only get a regeneration if you're playing Poseidon, and you need an upgrade for that, whereas Odin has that inherently. Or you can get healing for other means if you're playing, say, some of the other Norse gods. Or if you're playing Egyptians, you have chariot archers. Your anti-cav situation is not particularly great, though, as Egyptians, because spearmen are not a particularly great unit. But the quality is not necessarily matching the cost. So you're paying a lot for units that are not necessarily gonna do so extremely well, considering the price you are paying. You do have some fairly sturdy units, I would dare say. That's probably the more substantial benefit when you're considering the Greeks. But in terms of like damage potential and like just the ability of massing units, you are going to struggle behind other civilizations. So you might get more myth units than anyone else, but you won't necessarily get as many human soldiers as anyone else. That is the downside, if you will, for the Greeks. On top of that, there's the discussion of siege equipment. So, Heliopoli are a pretty solid unit. Like, siege towers for the Egyptians are fairly solid units. Heliopoli don't do the same level of damage, nor near the same level of damage as siege towers, but they're far more sturdy than siege towers. And that is a particular benefit that you can use as the Greeks if you're playing a tier 4 game. I would say the disappointing aspect, if you want to view it like that, is the Petroboli compared to, say, the Egyptian catapult. Yes, I know different tiers, but Petroboli are very squishy as units. Don't do anywhere near as much damage as, say, Egyptian siege or even Norse siege, and they do cost quite a bit. So you do have that downside, if you will, for the Greeks when it comes to their siege equipment. But then again, you can always view the myth units as siege equipment, right? Just the same way the Norse can really view mountain giants as their siege equipment, because, Jotuns are incredibly freaking powerful. They're not easy to take down. So those are some of the upsides, some of the downsides. Another upside is that you're the only civilization, actually, that has elite units available in Age 4, dependent on the god. I mean, everyone has, like Atlanteans have fanatics as an example, to be sure. There's obviously other combat abilities or upgrades, war elephants for the Egyptians, that kind of stuff. But like having really strong units in tier 4 is an upside, be it the Myrmidons that are available to Zeus, the Heteroi that are available to Poseidon, or the crossbows that are available to Hades. Now, these are units with a specific purpose. Myrmidons are kind of like general purpose. Heteroi are, elite cavalry, but with all the downsides they have for being cavalry. And the crossbows are expensive, but really solid. Take a while to build, expensive, you only have so many structures to build them from. That's one of the downsides, to be sure, with regards to that. But still, pretty good units, if you can get a good number of them. That may be an issue, however, because you can only build these units from fortresses. And it's kind of weird that you don't see them in the tech tree over here. Like, it's not showing up in the tech tree for any gods. Like, that is a bit annoying. You would like to have that kind of information over here. You do have a good selection of minor gods as well. Hephaestus with a massive economic benefit, Dionysus with bronze, Athena with restoration. Regardless of which of the major gods of the Greeks you are playing, you do have a good selection of gods. Some better than others, to be sure, but like, someone made the comment recently, like Aphrodite, the way she's viewed, like curses, like basically multiple lightning bolts being struck at the same time against an enemy army. Yeah, that can be extremely powerful. Or Apollo, just, you put an underworld passage in the middle of the enemy base or behind the enemy base where they don't expect it. After you get vision, and you just put your army in their gathering line, you screw them over, and the opponent doesn't necessarily know if that's going to happen, right? Because you can always get, you can always get vision, lose vision, then get vision again. So you can always keep an opponent on an edge if you're playing the Greeks, and that would be very, very strong. I mean, honestly, if you had something equivalent to the Egyptian siege towers, I'm sure the meta would be go Apollo, get those kind of siege towers, put them from the underworld passage, and just destroy the enemy base. And if we lose the siege towers, no problem, right? No big iffy, because you've hurt the opponent more than they've hurt you if you destroy something like a town center, let alone the fact that you can kill a bunch of villagers in the process. Those are some of the benefits of the Greeks, but yeah, the cost of things relative to their combat power. It's not just the inherent cost, because other civilizations have expensive things as well. Don't get me wrong on that. But the cost of things versus their combat effectiveness doesn't necessarily match up. But you do at least have the flexibility of an army roster. That is one of the upsides. Regardless of what you're facing, you have a tool at your disposal to deal with it. Oh, dealing with a lot of infantry, get Hypaspis. Dealing with a good amount of cavalry, get Hoplites. They might not be the best anti-cav unit, but they at least exist. Or get Padromi, who are counter-cavalry, dedicated for that role. Not so great against anything else, but they are good against cavalry. That is a good amount of power. Oh, dealing with a bunch of range units, you can get Peltas. Dealing with a bunch of infantry, you can get Toxotes. Regardless of what you're fighting, you do have an answer available to you as the Greeks. So I guess it's, you do have a huge amount of flexibility available that other civilizations may be lacking. You don't really have a fast-moving range unit unless you're counting Hermes, which is a specific minor god, and you're sacrificing other things for that. But you don't have like Thermas or chariot archers as an example, nor do the Norse, mind you, but Norse have other advantages as well. So those are some downsides of the Greeks. They don't necessarily specialize in certain things as much as other civilizations, in particular with their human roster of units. Myth units, obviously different discussion. And that I guess is supposed to give you that kind of specialization power, though with the trade-offs that myth units vulnerable to heroes and their damage. But that is what you have to deal with the Greeks. Good amount of power, really good baseline, a fairly balanced race, and quite a civilization-sorry race. I keep thinking about Total War. A pretty balanced civilization. And the benchmark I'd say for that other civilizations compare to. And it's kind of worth saying this with regards to the Greeks compared to other civilizations. When you look at every other civilization in the game, all others, be it Egyptians, Norse, or Atlanteans, doesn't matter who we're talking about, You do have some gods, some major gods that are really strong, like Isis and Set, but then you have Ra, who is the worst god in ladder at the moment based on statistics. You look at the Norse, yeah, you have the freaking powerhouse that is Odin that's also dominating multiplayer, but then you have Freyr and Thor, who are struggling. You then have, you have the Atlanteans who have an upside with Cronus, but have downsides with Uranus and Gaia. Whereas with the Greek major gods, all of them have a particular niche and all of them work quite well, one way or another. Yes, Hades has dropped quite a bit in terms of the win rate online, but still is a much better situation than you're seeing with other civilizations with their major gods. So it is different, very different playstyles dependent on the major god you are picking, or rather different focus with them. Though you obviously have all the units or most of the military units still available, just the elite units being different over there. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.